He showed up to every blind date, broke worn flannel, beat-up truck, cash on the table, exact change. Every woman left within the hour. Then he met her, she walked in, he stood up. As she also noticed the logo on his shirt, the truck in the lot, the way he tipped without thinking. She knew by the end of the first coffee. She said nothing for weeks. Nothing. Then the notes started. "You don't belong here," left under her wiper. In her mailbox, inside the hospital, staff only, someone knew about them. Someone was scared of what was building between two people in a corner booth at a small town diner. She didn't panic, she documented, she waited. He didn't panic either, he ran the plate, made a call, and found a name he never expected to find. Someone he'd trusted for 15 years. But that's not the part that stopped him cold. The part that stopped him cold was a medical record. March 2016. A training accident in Virginia, and a nurse's name on the admitting line. Her name. She had kept him alive once before, neither of them knew, until now. Every morning started the same way for Cole Maddox, 5:15 a.m. Still dark outside. The garage smelled like motor oil and old coffee. A radio played somewhere in the corner. Country station, low volume, more habit than music. Cole was flat on his back under a '94 Chevy pickup, flashlight in one hand, wrench in the other. The kind of work that required nothing from your brain. Just your hands, just patience. He liked it that way. Most people who met Cole Maddox assumed he was exactly what he looked like. A mechanic in his late 40s, salt and pepper hair, always a little too long. A flannel shirt with a small logo on the chest, Maddox Auto, Millhaven, TN. Hands that told you he'd been working with them since before he could drive. He drove a Ford F-150, 2009. Paid cash for it 12 years ago. Still ran fine. He saw no reason to change. What most people didn't know, what Cole made sure most people didn't know, was the rest of it. 3 auto shops across 2 counties, a parts supply chains that service truck fleets from Nashville to Knoxville. 11 rental properties, small commercial building on Route 9 that he'd bought for almost nothing in 2018 and was now worth 4 times what he paid. Total, somewhere north of $14 million, as Cole didn't think about it much. He thought about the Chevy. He was almost done with the brake line when his phone buzzed on the concrete floor beside him. He didn't look at it immediately. He finished the connection first, tightened it, tested it. Then he wiped his hands on a rag and picked up the phone. Text from his neighbor, Paulette Henderson. 63 years old, retired schoolteacher, made the best apple pie in Millhaven, and had very strong opinions about Cole's personal life, confirmed for 7 p.m. at Patty's. Her name is Becca. She's a night nurse at County. You're going to like her. Don't be weird. Cole stared at the screen for a moment. He hadn't agreed to this date. He hadn't been consulted. Paulette had asked him last Sunday. He'd said, "I'll think about it," and apparently that was good enough for her. He typed back, "I haven't said yes," 3 seconds later. "You haven't said no either." 7 p.m. Wear something clean. Cole set the phone down, slid back under the truck. This would be the 4th blind date Paulette had arranged in the past year. The other 3 had each lasted less than 45 minutes. Not because anything dramatic happened, not because anyone was rude, just because nothing happened at all. Cole was 47 years old. He'd spent 20 years in the Navy, the last 12 as a SEAL, the kind of work you'd talk about at dinner parties. He'd come home with a shoulder that ached in cold weather and a way of sitting in restaurants where he always had his back to the wall. He'd been married once, to a woman named Diane, who had been bright and warm and genuinely good, until the deployments got longer and the silences between them got longer too. She left while he was overseas. He came home to an empty house and a note that was not unkind but was very final. He didn't blame her. He understood. That was almost worse than being angry. After he got out of the Navy, Cole had built the business quietly. No press, no LinkedIn profile. He showed up at the shops, worked alongside his guys, drove the same truck, ate at the same diner. He had a reason for that, a reason he didn't talk about much. But it mattered to him more than the $14 million did. He stayed under the Chevy until the sun came up. Then he made coffee, showered, changed into a clean flannel shirt, and opened the shop for the day. He didn't think about 7 p.m., not yet. Let me tell you about the 3 dates before Becca. Because they matter, not because they were dramatic, but because of what Cole learned from each one, even if he didn't realize he was learning anything at the time. The first was a woman named Carolyn. Retired high school principal, 62, silver hair, very put together. Paulette had described her as sharp as a tack and doesn't take nonsense from anyone. They met at a restaurant in town, a nicer place than Patty's. Tablecloths, candles, a wine list. Cole had parked his truck around the corner. He wasn't sure why he did that, he just did. She asked good questions. She was clearly intelligent. Cole answered honestly. He fixed cars, he'd been in the Navy, he lived alone on the edge of town. About 20 minutes in, she asked about his plans for retirement. Cole said he didn't think about retirement much. She asked what he meant. He said he liked working. She looked at him across the table with the particular expression of a woman who had spent 30 years evaluating people and had just completed her evaluation. "You seem like a man who got stuck somewhere," she said, kindly. But clearly Cole didn't disagree. Finished their meals. They shook hands outside. She was perfectly cordial. He drove home. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't relieved. He was just confirmed. The second was a woman named Phyllis. She sold real estate, wore good jewelry, laughed easily. Paulette said she was fun. "Cole, she's just fun. Is that so hard?" They met for coffee. Phyllis talked a lot, which was fine. Cole didn't mind listening. She asked him what kind of work he did, and he said he owned a garage, and she nodded and said, "Oh, like a small business?" And he said yes. Then she asked if he owned or rented his house. He said he owned it. She asked what it was worth. He said he wasn't sure. He'd bought it a while ago. Something shifted in her face. A very small recalibration. He recognized it. She'd decided what kind of man he was based on what he did and what his house was probably worth. And the number she came up with wasn't the right number. She was still pleasant. She paid for her own coffee without being asked. She said she had a good time and maybe they'd run into each other around town. Cole said sure. He drove home. He thought, she's not wrong to want security. She's not doing anything wrong. But he also thought, that's not what I'm looking for. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he knew what it wasn't. The third date was the one that stayed with him longest. Her name was Helen. She was 51, a bookkeeper, quiet and careful with her words. Paulette said she was sweet, Cole, genuinely sweet. Just give her a chance. They met at Patty's Diner, actually. Same corner booth Cole always chose. Helen was already there when he arrived. She'd ordered water and was reading the menu like it mattered, and something about that made Cole feel at ease. It's the best of the three. They talked for almost 2 hours. She was funny in a dry, understated way. She'd grown up in eastern Tennessee like Cole. She'd lost her husband 4 years ago and was still finding her footing. Cole liked her, genuinely. At the end of the evening, she said something he'd thought about a lot since. "You're a careful man," she said. "I can tell. You don't show people things until you decide you trust them." She paused. "I respect that. But I think you've been careful for so long, you might have forgotten what it feels like to just let someone see you." Cole didn't have an answer for that. He said goodnight. She said goodnight. They never called each other, but that line stayed. You might have forgotten what it feels like to just let someone see you. Thought about that sometimes, under the truck in the early morning. He wasn't sure she was wrong. He wasn't sure she was right either. He just knew there was something in him that had been locked for a long time, and he wasn't in any hurry to force it open. So when Paulette texted him about a woman named Becca, a night nurse at County General, Cole didn't cancel, but he didn't expect anything either. He went because Paulette made good pie, and he didn't want to lose access to it. That was what he told himself anyway. Becca Harlow had a system. It had taken her about 15 years to develop it, and it had served her well in ways she didn't always talk about. The system was simple. Watch what people do when they think no one is paying attention, not what they say, not even how they say it. What they do in the small, unguarded moments, how they treat a server, whether they check their phone while you're talking, how they react when something inconvenient happens. Those moments tell you everything. Becca was 37 years old, and she had learned this skill partly from nursing, 12 years of night shifts at County General, watching people in their most unguarded states, and partly from life itself. She'd grown up in a small town in East Tennessee, about 40 miles from Millhaven. She'd been heavy most of her life. Not the kind of heavy that people politely overlook, the kind that makes people think they can say things. Teenagers in school hallways, relatives at Thanksgiving, strangers in parking lots who apparently felt a calling. She'd heard it all. She'd also learned that most of that noise said very little about her and a great deal about the people making it. She'd married at 28. A man named Danny Harlow, a construction worker with a wide laugh and absolutely terrible taste in music and the most uncomplicated decency she'd ever encountered in a person. He was the kind of man who remembered the exact coffee order of everyone he'd ever met and never once made Becca feel like she was too much or not enough. He died 6 years ago. A crane accident, 20 minutes after his lunch break. He was 34 years old. That was the thing about grief that people who hadn't been through it didn't fully understand. It didn't get smaller. You just grew around it. You built a life that accommodated the shape of what was missing. Becca had done that. She'd kept working. She'd kept showing up to her shifts. She'd kept making her neighbor's kid soup when he had the flu and keeping the coffee going at the nurse's station and doing the small, reliable things that made a life feel like a life. She hadn't dated anyone. In 6 years, she had been asked out a handful of times and said no each time. Not out of bitterness, not even out of grief exactly, just because no one had made her feel like it was worth the risk. Her friend and housemate, Noreen Pratt, a charge nurse 15 years older, who had appointed herself Becca's social director, had been pushing for months. "You are 37 years old," Noreen said one evening, standing in the kitchen doorway while Becca made tea. "You are funny, and you are kind, and you are genuinely good at listening, which is rarer than people think. And you are spending your Friday nights drinking chamomile tea. I like chamomile tea, Becca. I'm fine, Noreen. I know you're fine. I want you to be more than fine." Becca had looked at her friend. Noreen was earnest in the way that sometimes exhausted people, but was also entirely genuine. She meant well. She always meant well. "One date," Noreen said. "Someone's neighbor knows someone. He fixes cars. He was in the Navy. I know almost nothing about him except that Paulette Henderson swears by him and she's a good judge of character." Becca thought about it for a moment. "One date," she said. "One date. If it's terrible, you owe me 2 months of doing the dishes without being asked." Noreen agreed immediately, which probably should have been a sign. On the evening of the date, Becca stood in front of her bathroom mirror for a long time. She'd done this before, stood in front of the mirror and done the quiet inventory that women like her, women who had spent years being told their body was the first and sometimes only thing people saw, did before going anywhere that required being seen. She wasn't vain. She wasn't catastrophizing. It was just an honest reckoning. She had a good face, good skin, good eyes, the kind of smile that her mother had always said could light up a room, which was the sort of thing mothers said but what wasn't untrue. She put on a navy blue dress. She'd bought it 2 years ago and barely worn it. She liked the color. Danny had once said she looked best in blue. "It suits the way you think," he'd said, which made no logical sense and was exactly the kind of thing he'd say. She looked at herself for another few seconds. Then she picked up her keys and went. Patty's Diner had been on the corner of Millhaven's Main Street since 1962. It had yellow vinyl booths, a counter with swivel stools, and a pie case that was the real reason most people came. The coffee was decent. The lighting was warm. It smelled like every good diner you'd ever been in. Coffee and grease and something sweet baking in the back. Cole was already there when Becca arrived. He was in the corner booth. Back to the wall, she noticed that immediately, filed it away. He was reading the menu, even though you could tell he'd been here enough times to know every item on it. He had a coffee in front of him. He hadn't touched it yet. He was bigger than she'd expected. Broad through the shoulders, the kind of frame that suggested physical work over a long time. Salt and pepper hair. A flannel shirt with something printed small on the chest. He looked up when the door opened. And he stood up, not in an exaggerated way, not making a production of it. He just stood, like it was automatic, like it was something he'd been taught so long ago it had become reflex. Becca paused for just a fraction of a second. She couldn't remember the last time someone had done that. She crossed the diner. He extended his hand. Cole Maddox. His voice was low, unhurried. Becca Harlow. She shook it. His hand was rough. She noticed that too. They sat down across from each other. The server, a woman named June who had been working at Patty's since the Clinton administration, appeared immediately. Becca ordered coffee. Cole asked for a refill. June left. There was a moment of silence, not an awkward silence, just a moment where both of them were doing what people who are good at reading people do, looking, taking inventory, not being weird about it. Then Cole said, "Paulette told me you work nights at County." 12 years, Becca said. "Night shift suits me. Less administration. More actual work." "What kind of work?" She looked at him. Most people, when they found out she was a nurse, said something like, "Oh, that must be so hard," or "I don't know how you do it." It was well-meaning. It was also a way of ending the conversation about the subject rather than continuing it. He had asked a follow-up question instead. "ICU mostly. Sometimes the ER when they're short-staffed." She paused. "A lot of end-of-life care. People coming in at the hardest part of things." Cole nodded slowly. "That takes something particular," Law said. "Being steady in those rooms, you get used to it. Or you learn how to carry it. There's a difference?" Becca looked at him. "Yeah," she said. "Getting used to it means you stop feeling it. Carrying it means you still feel it. You just know how." Cole considered that. Like he was actually thinking about it, not just waiting to talk. That's a better answer than most people would give, he said. You ask better questions than most people do, she said. Something shifted slightly in his expression. Not a smile, exactly. More like a door that opened about an inch. The conversation moved the way good conversations move, without a visible track. They talked about the town, about the diner. He'd been coming here since he was a kid, he said. His father used to bring him on Saturday mornings after they'd worked in the yard. She'd grown up 40 miles east, but had friends in Millhaven all through her 20s. She'd moved here after Danny died. Needed a change of address, not a change of life. She wasn't running from anything. She just needed different walls to look at while she put herself back together. He asked about Danny without making it strange. She told him a little. He listened without the specific kind of careful silence that meant he was uncomfortable and waiting for the subject to change. How long were you together? He asked. Married 6 years. Together 9. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. He was a good man, the uncomplicated kind. I didn't know how rare that was until I didn't have it anymore. Cole didn't say, I'm sorry, he said. That's a hard thing to know. She looked at him. Yes, she said. It is. They were quiet for a moment. You said you were in the Navy. He said, 20 years, what kind? A pause. The kind that isn't great dinner conversation. She understood what that meant. She didn't before. You opened the shop? Same thing, fixing things. Just different kinds of things. You like the work. I like having something in front of me that's either broken or it isn't, he said. And knowing which one it is, she heard what was underneath that. She filed it away. Then she looked down at her coffee and noticed his shirt, the small logo on the chest pocket. Maddox Auto, Millhaven. She'd seen that name before. In passing on a sign coming into town, on a panel van parked outside the hardware store. She'd assumed it was a small local operation, but a few weeks back, she'd overheard a conversation at the hospital. A hospital administrator talking to someone in the hall about a lease renewal. The commercial building on Route 9. The landlord, some guy named Maddox, the administrator had said, owns half the properties on the east side of town. Near as I can tell, she'd thought nothing of it at the time. Now she thought of it. She looked at the logo, looked at the man across from her, the flannel shirt, the rough hands. 2009 truck she'd noticed in the parking lot when she'd pulled in. She'd recognized it because one of the nurses' husbands had the same model, same color. She put the pieces together quietly, the way she'd always done. Maddox Auto. 3 locations. She'd seen it on the town's business directory at some point. Not a small operation, a real business, and yet here he was. Patty's Diner. Tipper at the coffee machine, wearing a shirt with his own company's logo on it, like a man who didn't need to advertise but hadn't thought to dress any differently. She picked up her coffee. She didn't say anything. She just smiled. A small, private smile directed mostly at the cup, the kind you make when something makes sense in a way you weren't expecting. She filed it away, and she kept listening. The evening ended at 9:15, not because either of them was in a hurry. The diner closed at 9. June had been very patient about it. They stood in the parking lot in the warm September air. The kind of night that couldn't decide if summer was really over yet. Streetlights on. The sound of something on a radio somewhere down the block. I'm glad Paulette doesn't take no for an answer, Becca said. Cole looked at her. Yeah, he said. I think I am too, not flowery, not performed. Just true, can I call you, he asked. She thought about it for exactly 1 second. Not out of hesitation, but out of honesty with herself, because she always tried to be honest with herself about what she wanted. Yes, she said. He nodded. She got in her car. He got in his truck. She watched him back out and pull onto Main Street in the rearview mirror. Then she sat there for a moment. She thought about the way he'd stood up when she walked in, the way he'd asked follow-up questions, the way he'd listened to her talk about Danny without making her feel like she'd said too much or the wrong thing. She thought about the logo on his shirt. She thought about the Route 9 building. The man the hospital administrator had mentioned owns half the properties on the east side of town. She started her car and pulled out of the lot. She wasn't angry. She wasn't confused. She wasn't even particularly surprised. She'd been reading people her whole life. She understood that sometimes people had reasons for the way they presented themselves. Sometimes those reasons were bad. Sometimes they were deeply human. She didn't know which one this was yet, but she was going to find out. Cole sat in his driveway for 9 minutes after he got home. He knew it was 9 minutes because he looked at the clock when he pulled in and again when he finally got out of the truck. He wasn't sure what to do with the evening, not in a complicated way. In the simpler way of a man who had been closed off for a long time, and had just had a conversation that felt, against his expectations, like talking to someone real. She'd talked about her husband without falling apart and without pretending it didn't matter. She'd talked about her work in a way that made it clear she was good at it and that it cost her something, and that she'd made peace with that cost. She'd listened to him in a way that most people didn't, not waiting for the next thing to say, but actually sitting with what he'd said. And she hadn't asked about money once, not in any form. Not the veiled version that Phyllis had done, not the direct version that others had tried. She'd asked about his work like she was interested in the work, like the work itself was worth talking about. He thought about Helen's line, the one that had stayed with him. You might have forgotten what it feels like to just let someone see you. He got out of the truck, went inside, made a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window looking at the dark yard. He thought, be careful. He thought, she's different. He thought those two things can both be true. He went to bed at 10:30. He did not sleep right away. Meanwhile, across town, Becca Harlow was at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and her laptop. She told herself she was going to do a quick search, just to confirm what she suspected. Just to put a frame around it, she typed Maddox Auto Millhaven TN into the search bar. 3 locations, a parts supply operation, a clean, professional website with a picture of a man in a flannel shirt standing in front of a garage. The man from tonight. She clicked through. Read a little. The business had been running for 11 years, employed about 30 people across the 3 shops, had won some regional business award in 2019. She closed the laptop. She sat with her tea. She wasn't angry. She wasn't offended. What she felt was more complicated than either of those things. She felt curious, genuinely curious about the why, about what it meant that a man who clearly had resources chose to present himself as a man with nothing. What that said about him, what he was looking for. She thought about his hands. The calluses weren't fake. The truck wasn't a prop. He'd been in that diner 100 times before tonight. The people there knew him. June had poured his coffee without asking how he took it. This wasn't a performance. It was just who he was. The rest was something he kept elsewhere. She found that interesting. She also decided something, quietly, the way she made most of her important decisions. She was not going to say anything. Not yet. She was going to wait and watch and let whatever this was develop at its own speed. Because one thing she'd learned from 12 years of working nights and from 9 years of loving someone and then losing him was that you couldn't rush the part where you found out who a person really was. You had to be patient. You had to keep your eyes open, and you had to be honest enough with yourself to act on what you actually saw. She finished her tea, washed the cup, put the notepad back in her bag. She lay in bed for a long time with the window cracked and the night sounds coming in, and thought about a man who stood up when she walked into a room. About what that meant. About whether she was being careful enough. About whether careful was even the right thing to be anymore. Cole called the next afternoon. Not that evening, which would have been eager. Not 3 days later, which would have been a game. The next afternoon from the parking lot of a hardware store, because he'd thought about it during the morning and decided there was no good reason to wait. She picked up on the second ring. She was between shifts. They talked for 20 minutes. About nothing in particular. A water main break that had half of downtown dug up, a patient she'd had the night before who'd decided to leave the hospital AMA, but had stopped to say a genuine thank you to her on his way out, which she said happened maybe twice a year and always caught her off guard. Cole told her about a car that had come into the shop that morning. A 1967 Mustang that a man had driven from Chattanooga specifically because he'd heard one of Cole's guys was good with the old Fords. The car was beautiful but had been maintained by someone who clearly loved it and understood almost nothing about it. Like someone put their whole heart into something and just kept getting the details wrong, Cole said. That's most people, Becca said. He laughed. Short, quiet sound. She got the sense it surprised him a little. They started talking every day or two. Not long conversations, both of them were busy. Both of them had irregular hours, but consistent. The kind of consistency that, after a couple of weeks, starts to feel like something you'd notice if it stopped. They went back to Patty's the following Friday. Then to a barbecue place on the edge of town that Cole said had the best pulled pork in the state, a claim Becca challenged, and then, after eating, conceded. One Saturday morning, he stopped by the hospital at the end of her night shift. Just to drop off coffee. 2 cups from the gas station on Route 9. Not fancy, but hot, and exactly how she took hers. which she hadn't told him, and he must have been paying attention. Sat on the low concrete wall outside the hospital's side entrance while the morning came in. Becca, still in scrubs, hair in a messy bun, probably looked like she'd been awake for 11 hours because she had. Cole, in his usual flannel, hands wrapped around the cup, talked about small things. Easy things, she thought. Not the same man, not the same feeling. But this quality of being easy to sit next to, she filed that away. She was careful with it, Warren noticed. Warren Tibbs was 53 years old and had been working at Maddox Auto for 9 years. He was a man of almost total silence. He communicated primarily through nods and through the specific quality of his expressions, but he noticed everything. One afternoon, Cole came back from dropping off coffee at the hospital and went directly to work on a transmission without saying a word. Warren watched him for about 4 minutes. Then he went to the break room, poured 2 fresh coffees, brought one to Cole, set it on the workbench next to him. Cole looked at the cup. "Thanks," Warren nodded, went back to his own work. That was it. That was the whole conversation. But Cole understood it. He and Warren had been working side by side long enough that the gesture meant something. Things seemed different lately. Yeah, okay, done. One evening in mid-October, Becca came to the shop after her errands, not because she'd been invited, or rather, she'd been told she could stop by whenever, which she'd understood as a genuine offer rather than a polite one. She let herself in through the side door. Cole was finishing up on a brake job. She found the old wooden chair, the one that lived in the corner of the main bay, origin unknown, and sat down with her library book. He didn't stop working. She didn't say much. It wasn't awkward. Warren came through once, saw the scene, made a small sound in the back of his throat that Becca was pretty sure translated to approval, and continued on his way. After a while, Cole said, without looking up from the rotors, "You don't have to sit all the way in the corner. I like this corner. It's the least comfortable chair in the building. I've sat in worse." Hospital waiting rooms are designed by people who want you to leave. He made the sound that was his version of laughing. She kept reading. She stayed for an hour. They talked occasionally. When she left, she said goodbye to Warren, who nodded at her with the gravitas of a man officiating something important. Cole watched her walk to her car. He thought, this is what it's supposed to be like, isn't it? Not a question. A recognition. He went back to work. She found the note on a Thursday night, 11:40 p.m., end of her shift. The parking lot behind County General was half empty. The lights in the lot did what the lights in those lots always did. Worked fine, mostly, with one in the far corner that flickered and had apparently been on the maintenance list for 3 months. Her car was parked mid-lot. She walked to it, unlocked it, started to get in, then she saw the paper under the driver's side wiper. She thought it was a flyer at first. They got those sometimes. Pizza places, oil change specials. She pulled it out. It was a piece of lined paper, folded once. Handwritten in block letters, "You don't belong here." She read it twice. She stood in the parking lot. Flickering light ticked in the corner. Somewhere on the street a car went by. The hospital building was behind her, warm and lit, full of people doing things that mattered. She looked at the note for a long moment. Then she folded it carefully, put it in her jacket pocket, got in the car, drove home. She did not call Cole. She didn't call him because she wasn't sure yet what the note meant. Could be random, could be someone from the hospital, a patient, a family member, some situation that had nothing to do with Cole. She'd worked 12 years in healthcare. Sometimes people were angry. Sometimes it was directed outward without much logic. She wasn't going to panic. She wasn't going to make Cole feel responsible for something she didn't even understand yet. She was going to watch. She was going to wait. She was going to collect information before she made any moves. That was her system. She got home at midnight. Noreen was already asleep. Becca made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and took the note out of her pocket. She looked at it again. The handwriting was careful, not rushed. Someone had taken their time with the block letters. That was interesting. People who were purely impulsive didn't usually print neatly. People surprised you that way sometimes. The scattered, warm ones, when they got frightened enough, when something felt like it was slipping away, they got careful. Fear had a way of organizing people who were normally loose with themselves. She'd seen it in patients. She'd seen it in families. She was seeing it now in the neat block letters on a piece of drugstore paper. She put it in the inside pocket of her bag, behind her ID badge, where she kept things she needed to remember to return to. Then she drank her tea and went to bed. She did not sleep right away either. But that note was just the first one. She didn't know that yet. And she didn't know that across town, Cole Maddox was lying awake thinking about what Helen had said. You might have forgotten what it feels like to just let someone see you. He was beginning to think that wasn't entirely true anymore. He was also beginning to think that being seen by the right person was a different thing entirely from being seen. He didn't have the words for what the difference was. He thought maybe he was in the process of finding out. In part 2, the notes keep coming. The person sending them knows things they shouldn't know. And Cole, whose instincts were trained to notice the thing that doesn't fit, starts to notice, but so does Becca. And what she finds will change what she thought she understood about the people closest to her. Second note appeared 10 days after the first, same parking lot, same spot under the wiper, same careful block letters on lined paper. This one said, "Some people know their place. You should learn yours." Becca read it standing in the cold October air. 7 of a long shift. She'd had 2 difficult cases overnight. One elderly man who didn't make it, one younger woman who did but barely. She was tired in the specific way that night nurses get tired, not just sleepy. Hollowed out, she folded the note, put it in her bag, photographed it first this time. She'd started doing that after the first one. A folder on her phone. Date, time, location. She was building a record the way she'd watched the charge nurses build incident reports over the years. Quietly, carefully. Without announcing it, she drove home and slept for 6 hours. When she woke up, she made coffee and sat with her phone and looked at the 2 photographs side by side. Same handwriting, same paper, the kind you found in any drugstore notepad, nothing distinctive. Same careful printing. What was different was the content. The first note had been vague, territorial but unfocused. "You don't belong here" could mean almost anything. The second note was more specific. "Some people know their place." That word, place, had a particular flavor to it. It was the kind of language used by someone who believed in hierarchies, who believed some people were above and some people were below, and that the arrangement shouldn't be disturbed. Becca had heard that language before. Not always in words, sometimes in looks, in the specific quality of silence that fell in certain rooms when she walked in. She had been hearing it in various forms her entire adult life. She put her phone down, drank her coffee, thought. She wasn't frightened yet. She was methodical. She did not call Cole. The third note was different in a way that changed things. It arrived not in the parking lot, but in the small cubby outside the nurse's locker room, the shelf where people left coffee cups and forgotten scarves and occasionally birthday cards. A place accessible to hospital staff, not random public. This note said, "Cole Maddox is not what you think he is. Ask him about the money." Becca stood in the hallway outside the locker room and read the note 3 times. Then she folded it and put it in her bag with the others. She went through the rest of her shift. She was professional and focused, and not one of her patients or colleagues would have known anything was different. But her mind was working. Whoever had written these notes knew her name, knew where she worked and what shift she worked, knew about Cole specifically, knew his name, knew there was something about his finances worth mentioning. This was not a stranger. This was someone inside her world or inside his. She added the 3rd photograph to her folder. She thought, "Someone is trying to scare me away from him." She thought, "They're underestimating me." She thought, "They're also giving me information every time they try." Cole noticed on a Tuesday. He noticed because his instincts noticed first, the way they always did. The body sending up a flag before the brain knew why. It was a small thing. He was dropping Becca off after dinner. He pulled into her street and stopped in front of her house. She got out and said goodnight. Normal, easy. But as she walked to her front door, she looked left, just briefly. A quick scan of the street. Such a practiced gesture that most people wouldn't have registered it. The kind of thing you only did when you'd gotten used to checking. Cole watched it. Watched her key in the door, go inside, lights come on. He sat in the truck. That look, the specific quality of it. He knew what that looked like from the inside. He'd been doing some version of it for 20 years, the automatic situational check, the constant low-level monitoring of what didn't fit. You didn't do that unless you had a reason. He drove home and thought about it. The next day, he paid attention differently. Watched the way she moved through spaces, the way she paused very briefly before she got into her car, the way her eyes moved around parking lots. 3 days after that, photographed a license plate, not obviously. He was good at not being obvious. A black Ford sedan parked down the street from the hospital, engine on but not moving. There when Becca went in for her shift, and there when he drove by an hour later. Parked facing away from the building's main entrance but angled in a way that gave a sightline to the side parking lot. It might be nothing. People sat in cars. People had reasons. But he texted the plate to a man named Garrett, who had been in Cole's unit and now did private security consulting in Nashville and had access to things that weren't exactly publicly available. "Run this for me when you get a chance," Garrett replied 6 hours later. On it, Cole didn't tell Becca any of this. He wasn't ready to tell her yet, not because he was hiding anything, but because he didn't know what he had yet. He wasn't going to bring her a half-formed picture. He was going to bring her a complete one. He also didn't tell her because she hadn't told him whatever it was she was dealing with, which meant she had reasons for handling it herself, and he was going to respect that until he couldn't. Warren noticed. He always did. One afternoon he put a fresh coffee on Cole's workbench. "Same as always," Cole said. "You ever feel like something's off but you can't find the specific piece yet?" Warren considered this for a moment. "Yes," he said. "What do you do?" Warren picked up his wrench. "Keep working. It usually shows itself." Cole nodded, went back to the engine. Warren was right about most things. The answer came from an unexpected direction. It was a Friday. Becca was halfway through a 12-hour shift when Noreen Pratt, charge nurse and his mates, stopped her in the corridor near the supply room. "Hey," Noreen said. "Can we talk later? After shift?" Becca looked at her. Noreen's expression was its usual version of earnest, but there was something underneath it. Something that Becca, who had been reading people for a long time, registered as off. "Sure," she said. The shift ended at 7 a.m. Becca was gathering her things at her locker when Noreen appeared in the doorway. So, Noreen said. "How are things with Cole?" "Good," Becca said. "You like him?" "I do." Noreen was quiet for a moment. She was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. Becca kept putting things in her bag without looking up. "Is it serious, do you think?" Noreen asked. Something in the question was wrong. The tone of it. Noreen had been enthusiastic about this relationship from the start. She'd been the one to push for the date, the one who wanted updates, the one who said "I told you so" 3 separate times after the first evening went well. This question didn't sound like any of those conversations. This question sounded careful. Becca closed her locker and turned around. She looked at Noreen directly. "What's going on, Noreen?" Noreen unfolded her arms, refolded them, looked at the floor briefly. "I just worry about you. That's all. You've been worrying about me by trying to set me up for 6 months. That's a different kind of worry than whatever this is." Noreen didn't answer. And that was the moment, because Noreen always had an answer. She was a talker, warm, a little scattered, always finding the next thing to say. The silence didn't fit. Becca thought about the notes. Thought about the careful block printing. Thought about the fact that the third note had appeared in a staff-only area. She thought about who had known about her date with Cole before it happened. Who had known Cole's name, his work, where he lived. Noreen had arranged the date. Noreen had told her all of it. Becca stood very still. She said quietly, "Noreen, did you write the notes?" The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds. It was its own answer. Noreen's expression crumpled, not into anger, into something worse, a kind of terrible, small shame. "Becca, the parking lot notes, the one in the staff cubby. I was trying to protect you. From what? From getting hurt? From someone who's been lying to you from the beginning. He hasn't lied to me. He's pretending to be broke. I know what he's doing." That stopped Noreen completely. Becca kept her voice steady. She was good at steady. She'd had years of practice keeping her voice steady in rooms that were falling apart. "I've known since the first night," Becca said. "I know about the shops. I know about the properties. I know he's not what he looks like on the surface. And I made a choice to let it play out because that's my choice to make. Becca, if you'd just listened, you were trying to scare me away from someone who makes me feel good." For the first time in 6 years, Becca paused. "Why would you do that, Noreen?" Again, the silence. And in the silence, Becca did what she always did. She watched. She watched the expression move across Noreen's face, and she read it the way she read everything. And what she saw wasn't malice. It wasn't some calculated scheme. It was loneliness. A specific, complicated loneliness. The kind that didn't always know how to sit with someone else's happiness. Noreen had been single for 11 years. She didn't talk about it much. She made jokes about it instead, the way people used humor to make something smaller. She had set Becca up with Cole. She had watched it go well. And something in her, something she probably hadn't fully understood herself, had turned. Becca recognized that feeling. She didn't like it, but she recognized it. She picked up her bag. "I'm going home," she said. "You and I will talk more, but I need you to hear this first." She looked at Noreen directly. "Those notes frighten me. You meant to frighten me. That's not something I can just set aside." Noreen's eyes filled. I know you do." Becca moved toward the door, then stopped. I'm going to file an HR report, not to get you in trouble, because it's the right procedure and because if I don't, it doesn't get addressed, Becca. I'm not ending our friendship, but I'm also not pretending this didn't happen. She left, she walked to her car, got in, put her hands on the wheel. She sat there for 3 minutes, then she drove home. She did not call Cole, not yet. Garrett got back to Cole on a Thursday morning. Cole was at the shop early. He read the message standing at his workbench with his first cup of coffee. The plate came back registered to a small LLC, a shell company, from the look of it. The LLC had a registered agent in Nashville. The agent was associated with several other businesses. One of those businesses had a name that Cole recognized, Walsh Capital Development. He read the name twice. Then he set his phone face down on the workbench, picked up his coffee, drank it. Walsh Capital Development belonged to Gideon Walsh. Gideon Walsh was 45 years old and had been Cole's closest friend for 15 years. They had met through a mutual contact in Nashville. Cole had just gotten out of the Navy, figuring out what came next. And Gideon had been in real estate for a decade, sharp and well-connected and genuinely good company. Over the years, they had talked through business decisions together. Cole had taken Gideon's advice on the Route 9 property. Gideon had borrowed Cole's contacts when he was building a residential project in Knoxville. They had dinner once a month, more or less. They talked on the phone. Cole had trusted him the way Cole trusted almost no one, slowly over a long time, based on accumulated evidence. And now Gideon's company vehicle was sitting outside Becca's hospital. Cole thought about that for a long time. Then he thought about Becca's scan of the street 2 weeks ago. He thought, she already knows something is happening. He thought, I need to know more before I move. He went back to Garrett. What does Walsh Capital have going on right now? Garrett, give me a day. Cole gave him a day. What came back was a partial picture. Walsh Capital was in the process of assembling a land package on the east side of Millhaven. Multiple properties. The kind of deal that required all the pieces to come together or none of them worked. Several of the properties in the package were Cole's. Cole's properties were not for sale. Gideon knew that. They'd talked about it not recently but a few years back, when Gideon had floated the idea of a partnership. Cole had said no. He wasn't interested in selling. The properties were income, yes, but they were also stability. People rented them. Some had been there for years. He wasn't turning them into someone's development project. Gideon had said he understood. Cole thought about that conversation now. He thought he didn't understand. He just waited. He sat with that. The question was why Becca fit into this. Why was Gideon, or someone working for Gideon, watching Becca? Cole thought about it from the angles he'd been trained to think about. You watched someone to gather information, or to send a message, or to apply pressure. He went very still. Pressure. Cole didn't have obvious pressure points. He had no family close by, no one who depended on him financially. He was careful with his business, and he was not a man who frightened easily. Someone had noticed that Becca was becoming important to him, and they were watching to see what they could do with that. Cole's jaw tightened. He picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. He called Gideon. Hey, Gideon said. Warm, easy, the way he always answered, tomorrow. In person, a brief pause. Everything okay? I want to have a conversation, Cole said. Tomorrow, sure, Gideon said. Of course. Lunch? My shop. 8 a.m., another pause. Okay, Gideon said. I'll be there. Cole hung up. He stood in the empty shop, early morning light coming through the high windows. The smell of oil and metal and coffee. He thought about 15 years. He thought about the conversations, the dinners, the phone calls. Thought about the trust that had built up across all of that time, like sediment, slowly layer by layer. He thought about how long it took to build something like that. And he thought about how fast it could come apart. Gideon arrived at 8 the next morning in a car that was too clean for the shop's parking lot. Cole was already inside. He'd been there since 6. Warren was in. But Cole had asked him to work in the back bay today. Warren had looked at him once, nodded, and disappeared. Gideon came in through the side door. Khakis, a good jacket, the confident ease of a man who was used to walking into rooms and feeling at home in them. He looked around. Just us? Just us, Cole said. Sit down. They sat on 2 work stools at the front bench. Cole had a coffee. He didn't offer one to Gideon. Gideon noticed. His expression adjusted, very slightly. What's going on? He said. Cole put the plate number on the bench between them. Just the number, written on a piece of paper. Gideon looked at it. Face did something careful. That's Walsh Capital, Cole said. Your car, outside County General. Multiple times in the last 3 weeks. Silence, Cole. Don't, Cole said. Quiet. Flat. Don't do the version where you explain how it's something else. I've been doing this for 20 years. Talk to me straight. Gideon was quiet for a moment. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at Cole, the Eastside package. He said, I've been putting it together for 2 years. The Route 9 building is the anchor piece. Without it, the whole thing falls apart. I've told you that property isn't for sale. I know that. Then what is this? Gideon spread his hands. I thought if there was a variable. Something you cared about enough that you thought you could use Becca, Cole said. The word use landed in the room and sat there. Not use her, Gideon said. Quickly, I wasn't going to hurt anyone. I was going to make things uncomfortable. Enough that you'd be open to a conversation about the property. You had someone watching her. Just watching. She found notes, Cole said, in her parking lot. In the hospital, Gideon went very still. I told them to watch. I didn't authorize, he stopped. I didn't know about notes, but you knew they were there, yes. The word fell out of him like something he'd been holding. Cole looked at his friend, at the man he'd sat across from for 15 years. He took a slow breath. I have one more question, he said, and I need the true answer. Gideon looked at him. Diane, Cole said, were you in contact with her before she left? The silence that followed was not the silence of a man deciding how to answer. It was the silence of a man who had been found out. Becca had said something once, on their second or third evening together, that had come back to Cole in pieces since. She'd said, the worst discoveries aren't the ones that surprise you. They're the ones that explain something you've wondered about for years. Cole had wondered. For 8 years he'd run the math on his marriage ending and never quite found the right answer. Diane hadn't been unhappy with him specifically. She'd been gone, distant for months before she left, like she'd made a decision and was waiting for the right moment. He'd always assumed it was the deployments, the absence. The way that work takes a person and returns them changed. He looked at Gideon now. Cole was quiet for a long moment after asking the question. Gideon said nothing, which was itself an answer. How long, Cole said. Before she left, Cole. I'm not asking you to justify it. I'm asking how long before she left. Another silence. Then, about 6 weeks, she called you. She emailed first. Said she had questions about your finances. About whether there was more than you were letting on. And you told her. I told her the rough outline. I thought I was helping her understand. You thought it wasn't your place to keep, Cole said. And you were right. It wasn't. But it was also mine to give. Not yours. Gideon had no answer for that. Cole stood up. You told her I had money. I told her the truth. She left 3 weeks later, Cole. She left because she thought I'd been hiding things from her. That I didn't trust her. And you gave her that. He paused. Not because she was wrong that I had more than I showed. But because she found out from someone else and it looked like I'd been lying. I didn't think. No, Cole said. You didn't. He stood up. Walked to the shop window. The main street was starting to wake up outside. A few cars. The hardware store's lights coming on. He stood there for a moment. I'm going to sell you the Route 9 building, he said. Gideon blinked. What? Fair market value. No games, no package deal. One building. Cole turned around. And then I want you to close your development project without using my name in any materials. And I want the man you hired to stay away from Becca permanently. Cole, that's more than fair. I'm not done, Cole said. After that's handled, I don't want to hear from you for a while. I don't know how long. But a while, Gideon stood. After everything, Cole said evenly, I still won't be the person who cuts someone off without giving them a way to square it. That's your way to square it. Take it or don't. He walked to the back of the shop. I'll have my lawyer call yours, he said. Let yourself out. He heard the side door open and close. He stood in the back bay for a minute. Warren was at the far end, head down over an engine, very focused on not looking up. Cole went to the coffee machine, poured a cup. He stood there and thought about Diane. About 8 years of carrying a version of events that had a piece missing. About the way that absence of explanation had lived in him like a low-level malfunction. Something he'd learned to work around without ever fixing. He thought, she's not blameless. She made a choice to leave, he thought, but she made it with bad information, he thought. I will never know what she would have chosen if she'd heard it from me first. That last one was the one that sat heaviest. He drank his coffee. After a while, Warren came over and put a hand briefly on his shoulder. Just a second, not making a thing of it, and then went back to work. Cole went back to work too. Becca had filed her HR report on Wednesday. She'd done it calmly, factually, the way she did things. She'd presented the photographs of all 3 notes. She'd stated what she knew and what she suspected and made clear she wasn't seeking any particular outcome. She was following procedure and expected the procedure to be followed in return. The HR coordinator had been visibly uncomfortable. Noreen was a well-liked charge nurse. 15 years at the hospital. This was going to be an uncomfortable process. Becca had said, "I understand it's complicated. It's still the right thing to do." She'd left and gone back to her shift. Noreen had been put on administrative leave while the complaint was reviewed. The building that had felt like home for 12 years was suddenly different. Quieter in certain ways. The nurses who were close to Noreen were careful around Becca. Not hostile, just careful. Becca understood. She'd been through things before that reshaped rooms around her. She knew how to function inside that, but she was tired. Not the work tired, a different tired. The kind that comes from protecting yourself and doing the right thing and not having anyone to put it down in front of. She'd picked up the phone twice in 3 days. Both times she'd set it back down. Not because she didn't want to talk to him, because she needed to know first whether he would show up without being asked. There was a difference, and she'd learned, a long time ago, to pay attention to that difference. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for. Maybe for the situation to be fully resolved before she brought it to him. Maybe. And she was honest enough with herself to consider this. She was waiting to see if he'd figure out that something was wrong. If he'd show up. She'd been told her whole life that she was too much, too heavy, too direct, too independent, that she didn't make it easy. Danny had never said that. But Danny was gone. She thought, "I am not going to audition for anyone." She thought, if he shows up, it's because he chose to. Not because I performed the right combination of helplessness. She finished her Friday shift at 7 a.m. The morning was gray and cold, November now. She walked to her car, and she saw Cole's truck parked at the edge of the lot. He was standing beside it. Hands in his jack casualness. Genuinely still, the way he was always genuinely still, because he wasn't a man who fidgeted. He'd seen her come out. He wasn't walking toward her. He was just there. She stopped. They looked at each other across the parking lot, 30 feet of gray morning air between them. She didn't move first, he didn't move first, she thought. This is the question, isn't it? Because what stood between them now was not nothing. There were things unsaid on both sides. There was the fact that she'd been dealing with something and hadn't told him. There was the fact that he'd clearly been doing something. She could see it in the way he looked, not distressed but changed, like a man who had resolved something recently and was still carrying the weight of the resolving. There was the larger question, the one she'd been sitting with since the first night in Patty's diner, since she'd seen that logo and understood what it meant. What is this, really? What are we to each other? And can two people, who have both learned to hold themselves very carefully, who have both been through things that teach you to hold yourself carefully, actually reach across that space? He stood in the cold morning air. He stood by his truck. Neither of them moved. And that pause, that moment suspended in the cold November gray, was its own kind of question, hanging over everything they'd built in the past 2 months. The answer was waiting in whatever happened next. She moved first, not toward him. She just sat down on the low concrete barrier at the edge of the lot, the kind of barrier that wasn't meant for sitting but was the right height for it. She set her bag down with her, looked at the gray morning sky for a moment. Then she looked at him. It wasn't an invitation exactly. It wasn't a rejection either. It was just Becca being Becca, making space without making demands, letting the moment be what it was without forcing it into a shape. Cole pushed off the side of his truck, walked across the lot, sat down beside her on the concrete barrier, not too close, not too far. They sat there for a moment. The hospital hummed behind them. Somewhere a car started. A bird, late in the season for birds, made a sound in the tree line at the far edge of the lot. Long shift? Cole said. 12 hours, Becca said. Couple of hard cases. Nothing I haven't handled before, but still hard. Always still hard. He nodded. She looked at him sideways, at the set of his jaw. The way he was holding himself, not tense exactly. More like a man who had recently put something down and wasn't quite sure what to do with his hands without it. Something happened, she said. Not a question. Yeah, he said. The people who were watching me. He turned to look at her. A full look. I knew someone was there. I didn't know who or why. She paused. I was working on the who, so was I. They looked at each other. There was a particular quality to this moment. Becca had learned to recognize it over 12 years of nursing. The moment just before someone said the thing they'd been not saying. The held breath before the exhale. Gideon Walsh, Cole said. She turned the name over. Your friend, yes. The one you've mentioned a few times. The real estate, yeah. He looked at the ground briefly. He wanted a property of mine. I'd told him no. He thought if he could make things complicated enough, I might reconsider. He was using me as leverage. That's the idea. Becca was quiet for a moment. Did it work? She said. What? Did he get the property? Something flickered at the corner of Cole's mouth. Not quite a smile. Fair market value, no games. And then he leaves you alone. I had a friend run the plate on that car. It came back to one of Gideon's shell companies. He's been told, clearly, that it's done. Becca looked at him. You've been working on this for a while. Since the second week, he said. Why didn't you tell me? Same reason you didn't tell me about the notes, he said. Didn't want to bring you a half-built picture. She considered that. Fair, she said. I sold it, Cole. You didn't have to. I know. I wasn't going anywhere because of some man in a car. I know that too, he said. I didn't sell it for that reason. She waited. I sold it because it was a clean way to end something that should have been ended a long time ago, he said. Gideon and I, there were things I hadn't seen clearly. About who he was, about what he'd done. He paused, not just now. Before she heard the weight in that. She didn't push. I'm sorry, she said. He looked at her. What are you sorry for? Losing a friend is hard. Even when it's right, he was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. It is. Sat with that. The morning was getting lighter. The gray was thinning at the edges, pale yellow pushing through. The parking lot was starting to fill. The day shift arriving. People in scrubs with coffee cups, purposeful, nodding to each other. Something I need to tell you, Becca said. Okay, the notes. I know who wrote them. He turned to look at her. Noreen, she said. My housemate. She paused. She was my friend. She told him the short version. The notes, the confrontation in the locker room, the HR report. She told it the way she told things. Clearly, without theater, without asking him to manage her feelings about it. Cole listened without interrupting. She liked that about him. He never interrupted. When she finished, he said, Are you okay? Not that's terrible, or I can't believe she did that. Not a performance of outrage on her behalf. Just, are you okay? I'm working on it, she said honestly. It's strange to live with someone after something like that. Even temporarily, I'm not moving out, she said. That's my house too, and running from things isn't something I do. He nodded. I know. We'll figure it out, she said. People are complicated. Even people who do things that aren't okay. He looked at her for a moment. You're more generous than I would be. Maybe, she said. Or maybe I've just seen enough people do things for small, sad reasons that I know it doesn't always mean what it looks like on the surface. What did it mean with Noreen? Becca thought about this. Loneliness, she said. Kind that doesn't always know how to be happy for someone else. I understand it. I don't accept what she did. But I understand the feeling. Cole was quiet. I've felt it, Becca said. Not toward anyone specific. Just that low-level ache of watching other people have things you've given up on having. You get through it. Most of the time, she looked at him directly. Most of the time, she said again. And then sometimes something happens that makes you think maybe you were wrong to give up on it. The morning light was fully there now. Pale gold through the clouds. Cole looked at Becca. At this woman who had gotten up at the end of a 12-hour shift and sat down on a concrete barrier in a hospital parking lot and told him the truth about hard things with the same steadiness she brought to everything. I need to tell you something too, he said. The whole thing, about the money, about why you don't have to. I want, he said. I need to. Not because I owe you an explanation, because I want you to have the real thing, not a version. She looked at him. Not here though, he said. Not in a parking lot. No. She agreed tonight, he said. Are you free tonight? She was. Yes, there's somewhere I want to take you first, he said, before we talk. Is that okay? She studied him for a moment. Okay, she said. He stood up, held out his hand briefly, not to pull her up, just offering it. She took it, stood, let go. Go sleep, he said. I'll pick you up at 5. She picked up her bag. Cole, he looked at her. Whatever you're going to tell me, she said. I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. He held her gaze for a long moment. I know, he said. That's why I want to tell you. She walked to her car. He walked to his truck. For the first time since the first note appeared under her wiper, Becca Harlow felt the particular quality of relief that comes not from a problem being solved, but from no longer carrying it alone. He picked her up at 5. She'd slept, showered, changed into the navy blue dress. She almost changed out of it again. It felt like too much, like she was trying, then she left it on. She was done second-guessing what she wore. Cole was at the door at exactly 5. He looked at her when she answered it. Something moved through his expression. Blue, he said. I know, she said. It's a thing. He didn't explain what he meant, and she didn't ask him to. They drove out of town on Route 9 and then onto a smaller road that Becca didn't know, heading east. The sky was doing something beautiful, the last of the sunset caught in the clouds, long streaks of orange and deep red over the hills. Tennessee in November. On the right day in the right light, it looked like something that couldn't be real. After about 15 minutes, Cole turned onto a gravel road that wound through a stand of bare oak trees and stopped in a small clearing. A low iron fence, an old gate, well kept, a cemetery, small, rural. The kind that belonged to a church that was probably half a mile away down another road. Maybe 40-50 stones, some of them very old. Becca got out of the truck without being asked. She understood without being told. This was a place Cole had brought her on purpose. That required presence, not questions. They walked through the gate, leaves under their feet. The cold and still. Cole stopped in front of a stone near the back. She read it. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Allen WEB-US. SEAL Team 3, 1978-2017. He ran toward the hard. She stood beside Cole and read it twice. He didn't say anything for a moment. She didn't either. Then he said, "We were in the same unit for 8 years. He was the kind of person who made everyone around him better without trying to. Without making it a thing." "What happened?" she asked quietly. "Training accident," he said. "In the water. He went back for someone who was in trouble. Got caught in something. By the time they got to him, he stopped. It was fast." That's what they said. Like it was supposed to be comforting. "It's not always comforting," she said. "Fast?" "No," he said. "It's not." They stood there. The bare trees. The cold sky going dark at the edges. "Last thing he ever said to me," Cole said, "the day before. We were just sitting around the way you do between things," he said. Cole paused. Like he was making sure to get it right, he said, "Maddox, when you get out and you've got all that money you've been quietly building, don't let it turn you into somebody I wouldn't recognize. I know you. Don't let it change you." To Becca was quiet. "He knew about the business stuff?" "Marcus knew everything," Cole said. "He was the only one I'd told. He thought it was smart, building something real while I was still serving. He wasn't wrong." Cole's jaw shifted. "He also knew me well enough to know it could go either way. That having money either makes you more yourself or less, depending on who you already were, and you made him a promise. I told him it wouldn't change me." Cole looked at the stone, the truck, the shop, the flannel shirts, paying cash, eating at Patty's. "None of that is a performance. It's just who I am. It was always who I was." The money came after. He turned slightly to look at her. "The dates were different," he said. "I should be straight about that. I did test people. Not consciously at first, but I watched what happened when someone thought they were with a mechanic versus what I suspected would happen if they knew the rest, and most of them failed the test." "Most of them," he said. "Which isn't really a judgment on them. People want security. People want to know what they're getting into. I understand that, but it told you something. It told me something." She looked at the stone, at the dates. Marcus Webb had been 38 years old when he died, just barely older than she was now. "He would have liked you," Cole said. She looked at him. "The way you handle things," he said. "Straight, no performance." He had no patience for anything that wasn't real. "It's the nursing," she said. "You can't afford to perform in that work. People can tell. The ones who need you most, they can always tell." Cole nodded slowly. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said. "I wanted you to understand, Sted, not just the what. The why I do," she said. They stood there a little longer, the dark coming in from the east, the last of the light holding in the west. Then Cole said, "I need to show you something else. Can we go back to the truck?" Sat in the truck with the heat running. Cole reached into the back seat and took out a manila folder. Old, slightly worn at the corners. He held it for a moment. "I've been going through some old records," he said. "I don't do it often. There's a box in my closet. Discharge paperwork, service records, medical files from my time in. I don't look at it much." "Okay," she said. "About a week ago I was looking for something else and I went through it." He opened the folder, took out a single sheet. "This is a medical record from March 2016. I was in Quantico, Virginia. A training exercise went wrong. Nothing dramatic. Just a combination of things that shouldn't have happened at the same time. I lost a significant amount of blood. I was brought into the emergency medical unit there." He handed her the paper. She took it. She read it. She was a nurse. She read medical records quickly, efficiently, her eyes going to the relevant fields by habit, pattern. Mad Docs, Cole date. March 14, 2016, attending facility. Naval Station Quantico Medical Unit, admitting nurse. B. Harlow, volunteer medical staff. She read it twice. The paper was perfectly still in her hands. She was very still. Cole said nothing. He watched her. She read it a third time. Not because she needed to. Because she needed a moment before she spoke. She remembered March 2016. She had been 28 years old. She'd been a nurse for 2 years at that point, working at County General, but she'd signed up for a rotating volunteer program. Nurses who gave a few weeks at various military medical facilities across the Southeast. It was supposed to look good on her record. It had ended up being something else entirely. She'd spent 3 weeks at Quantico and come home understanding things about herself she hadn't known before. She remembered a night in the second week, a training injury, multiple patients from the same incident. She'd been assigned to the second one. A large man, dark hair, substantial build, he'd lost blood. He was on the edge of consciousness when they brought him in. She'd established the IV line, talked to him, kept him present. He'd grabbed her wrist, not violently, desperately. The way people grabbed at the only solid thing in a room that was spinning. She'd said, "I'm here, you're going to be okay." "What's your name?" he'd said. "Cole," and then he'd gone under, and she'd done her job. 2 hours later, a nurse from the next shift had told her he was stable, and she'd moved on to the next patient because that was the work. She had thought about him after, not romantically, not at 28, not in that context. She'd thought about the way he'd held on, the way the fear was in his grip and nowhere else. She'd wondered in the way you wonder about people you help at their worst moments, whether he was okay, whether he had made it back to something good. She had never known his last name. She looked up from the paper. Cole was watching her, very quiet, very still. "I remember you," she said. The words came out softer than she intended. "I remember that night," she said. "I didn't know your last name. I never knew what happened to you after. You told me I was going to be okay," Cole said. His voice was different, lower. "I don't remember a lot of that night, but I remember a voice. Someone who was steady, who didn't sound scared even though." "I was scared," she said. "I just couldn't show it." "Yeah," he said. "That's what made it work." She set the paper down carefully on the folder in his lap. She looked out the windshield at the cemetery, at the iron gate, the bare trees, the dark settling in over everything. 9 years, she said. 9 years, he agreed. She thought about the math of it. She'd been 28, and he'd been 38. She'd been a volunteer nurse at the beginning of her career. He'd been a SEAL at the end of his. They had been in the same room for 2 hours in March of 2016 and then moved on, both of them, to the years that followed. The years that had shaped them to the people who had sat across from each other at Patty's Diner 2 months ago. "Do you think?" She started, then stopped. "Say it," he said. "Do you think it means something? That it was you then, and now?" "I don't know what it means," he said. "I know what it feels like." "What does it feel like?" He thought about it. Cole always thought before he answered. That was one of the things she'd noticed first. "It feels like something was already decided," he said. "Before either of us knew we had any say in it." She looked at him. "Marcus used to say, 'Some things find each other,'" Cole said. He meant it in a military context, how a unit comes together, how the right people end up in the right place. He paused. "I'm using it differently." Becca looked down at her hands in her lap. The paper, her name on it from 9 years ago. She had held this man's wrist in a medical unit in Virginia when she was 28 years old, and she had not known who he was, and she had kept him present until he was safe, and then she had moved on. And here he was. "Cole," she said. "Yeah, I'm glad you didn't fall asleep." Something broke open in his face. It was small, barely visible in the low light of the truck, but she saw it. She was very good at seeing things people didn't mean to show. He made the sound that was his version of laughing, quiet, brief, and more honest than most people's full laughs. "Me too," he said. They drove back into town and ended up at Patty's. It felt right. Comfortable in the way that places could become comfortable when you've accumulated enough good evenings in them. June seated them in the corner booth. Their booth now, by unspoken agreement, because Cole always wanted his back to the wall and Becca had started preferring it too, having spent enough time with him to understand why. They ordered coffee for both, pie. Cole got the apple, Becca got the chess pie, and they'd established a rotation of sharing that June had started accounting for by bringing 2 forks automatically. "There's something I want to say," Cole said. "Okay. I wasn't fully honest with you. Not in a lie exactly, but in a withholding the money," she said. "The money. And the reason behind the way I handled it. You told me the reason, Marcus." "That's the true part," he said. "There's another part that's also true." She waited. "The woman before you," he said, carefully. "Not Diane. After Diane. First person I opened a door to after." He turned his coffee cup slowly. "Her name was Carol. We dated for about 3 months. I thought it was turning into something. What happened?" "She found out about the accounts," he said. "Not from me. From something she found by accident, and she left. Not that night. Within the week." He paused. "She didn't say it was because of the money. She had other reasons. Good reasons, probably. But the timing told you something." "Timing confirmed something I'd already suspected," he said. That if I showed the whole picture at once, I'd never know what part of it someone was actually responding to. So you hid the picture. So I hid the picture. She nodded slowly. I understand that, she said. I don't love it. But I understand it. You should know it wasn't just about testing people, he said. Genuinely, it was about being who I was before any of it. Before the business, before the money. When I was just a kid from East Tennessee who liked fixing things. He paused. That person is still the real one. The rest is just what happened after. I know that, she said. He looked at her. You do. I knew it the first night, she said. The logo on your shirt. The truck. The way you talked about the shop. Those weren't props, Cole. That was you. The rest was just something you were keeping in a separate drawer. You weren't angry. I wasn't angry. Why not? She thought about how to answer that honestly. Because the thing you were hiding wasn't who you were. It was just something you had. She looked at him. People hide all kinds of things. Some of them are character. Some of them are just circumstances. I've learned to tell the difference. How? By the small things, she said. The way you talked about the shop like the work itself mattered. Not the outcome, the work. The way you tipped June without thinking about it. You were the same person whether you thought I was watching or not. That's rare. That told me what I needed to know. He was quiet for a moment. There's one more thing, he said. Tell me. He told her about Gideon and Diane. About the conversation Gideon had relayed. About the 8 years of running math on his marriage and coming up short. He told it plainly, the way he told most things. Not looking for sympathy. Just making sure she had the complete picture. She listened. She didn't fill the pauses. When he was done, she sat with it for a moment. How do you feel about it? She asked. Now that you know. Complicated, he said. She still chose to leave. I can't put that on Gideon entirely. But you carried it wrong for 8 years, yeah. The self-blame part, yeah. She looked at him steadily. You weren't hiding things from her, Cole. You were protecting something. There's a difference, is there? Yes, she said. Hiding is about shame. What you did. With Marcus, with the promise, with the way you lived, that wasn't shame. That was identity. You can't blame yourself for not handing someone a full explanation of your identity before you decided to trust them with it. He looked at her across the table. You're going to have to give me a minute, he said. Take your time, she said. He down. Looked up. Something had shifted in his face. Not dramatically, not in the way of movies. Just the specific thing that happens when a person hears something true about themselves that they'd been waiting a long time to hear. Where did you learn to say things like that? He said. 12 years of nights, she said. And one very good marriage that taught me what it looks like when someone is trying their best, Danny, he said. Danny, she said. She smiled. Just a little. The private kind. He would have liked you, she said. He had no patience for men who didn't mean what they said. What would he have thought of this? Cole asked. All of it, she considered. He would have said, she's been alone long enough. Let her be happy, she paused. He was uncomplicated like that. It was his best quality. Cole nodded. They ate their pie. They talked about other things. Smaller things, easier things. The way patties got decorated for Christmas starting the week after Thanksgiving. The way the hills looked in early December when the frost came in. Patient she'd had last week who had survived something that by all medical logic he shouldn't have and had spent his first lucid moment asking if someone could get his wife on the phone. That's why you do it, Cole said. That's exactly why, she said. June came by, filled their coffee without asking. Gave Cole the check. He took it without looking at it, put cash down without counting it, left a good tip. Becca watched. Always cash, she said. He looked up. Something flickered. For Marcus, she said. Not a question, for Marcus. He said. She nodded. The conversation with Noreen happened on a Sunday afternoon. 3 weeks had passed since the HR filing. Noreen had been returned to limited duties after the review, a formal reprimand, a note in her file, mandatory counseling sessions. Not fired. Not destroyed. The house had been quiet in ways it hadn't been before. Not hostile. Just recalibrated. Becca had been thinking about what she wanted to say. She hadn't rushed it. When she was ready, she knocked on Noreen's bedroom door. They sat in the living room, 2 women in their late 30s and late 50s, with coffee and the kind of quiet that meant something was about to be addressed honestly. I want to understand, Becca said. Not excuse. Understand. Noreen held her coffee mug with both hands. She looked older than she had 2 months ago. I don't fully understand it myself, she said. I've been talking to the counselor about it. What have you figured out? Noreen was quiet for a moment. I set you up with him, she said, and it went well, and I was happy for you. I was genuinely happy for you. She stopped, and then it kept going well, and I started to something happened. Something small and ugly that I'm not proud of, Envy, Becca said, not accusatory. Just accurate, yes. And something else. Noreen looked at her. Fear, I think, that I'd lose you. That you'd move toward him and I'd be left with an empty house and a friend who was always somewhere else. Becca listened. That's not a justification, Noreen said quickly. I know it's not. You don't scare someone you care about because you're afraid of losing them. That's backwards. I know it's backwards, it is, Becca said, and it's also very human. Noreen looked at her. I'm not saying what you did was okay, Becca said. It wasn't. It frightened me. It was a violation of my privacy and my safety, and I had to deal with it alone for weeks before I understood what was happening. I know. But, Becca said, I also know what it is to be afraid of being left. I know what it is to watch other people move toward things you've stopped believing are available to you. She paused. I spent 6 years being that person, so I understand the feeling, not the action. The feeling. Noreen's eyes were wet. I don't deserve. I'm not talking about deserving, Becca said. I'm talking about what's true. She looked at her. You need to deal with your own loneliness, Noreen. Not because it's shameful, because it's eating at you. And you're a better person than what it's turning you into. Noreen wiped her eyes. Are we? She started. We're not back to where we were, Becca said. I don't think we can be. Not quickly, she paused. But I'm not leaving and I'm not cutting you off. We live in this house together and we've worked side by side for 5 years, and there's history between us that matters. Okay, Noreen said quietly. You have to do the work though, Becca said. The counseling. The honest version of it. Not the version where you say what they want to hear, I know. Good. Becca stood, picked up her mug. I have plans this afternoon, she said. I'll be back by 9. Noreen looked up. Cole? Yes. Noreen nodded, looked down at her coffee. Good, she said. I mean that. I know it doesn't count for much right now, but I mean it. Becca looked at her for a moment. It counts for something, she said. Not everything, but something. She got her coat and went. December had settled into Millhaven the way December does in East Tennessee. Cold that had opinions. Frost on the truck windows in the morning. The smell of wood smoke from the houses along the back roads. The diner with its Christmas lights strung up in the window. The same lights June had been using since the early 2000s, replaced bulb by bulb over the years until almost none of the original ones remained. But no one would have called it anything but the same lights. Cole and Becca sat in the corner booth. It was a Saturday evening, no particular occasion. They had reached the stage of things where no particular occasion was needed, and that stage had crept up on both of them without announcement. Warren had given Cole a look 2 weeks ago, his version of a smile, which most people would have mistaken for a neutral expression, and had said entirely out of nowhere, "You're different," Cole had said, "better or worse." Warren had considered this with the full seriousness he applied to all things. Better, he'd said. Then he went back to the engine. Paulette Henderson had called Cole the week before, not to ask how things were going. She already knew, small town. He called to say she'd made a pie and he could come by and get it whenever he wanted. He'd gone on a Thursday afternoon. She'd handed him the pie at the door. Apple, still warm, and looked at him for a moment the way she sometimes did. You look different, she said. Warren said the same thing. Warren is a smart man. She patted his arm. Bring her by sometime. I want to meet her properly. Cole had said he would. He meant it. That was that at the diner they'd eaten. The pie rotation had continued. Apple for Cole, chess for Becca, 2 forks. June had long since stopped asking and just brought both. The dinner crowd had thinned. The Christmas lights buzzed warmly in the window. A song on the jukebox that neither of them had selected, but that neither of them minded. Becca was looking at her coffee. Can I ask you something? She said, always, the first night. When I smiled at my coffee, he looked at her. You said later. You knew I knew from that moment. I thought I knew, he said. I wasn't certain, but you kept going. Yes. Why? You thought I'd already figured it out. Why not just tell me then? Clear it up. He thought about it. Because it changed the question, he said. If you knew and didn't say anything, that meant you'd made a choice. And I wanted to understand the choice before I interrupted it. You wanted to see what I'd do with the information. I wanted to see who you were with it. Yes, she looked at him. And, he said, you were exactly who I thought you were. Someone who cared about the thing, not the number. She was quiet for a moment. I almost said something, she admitted, that first night. When you counted out the cash, why didn't you? Because it felt like it would have been, she thought for the right word, unkind. You were giving me something real. The version of yourself you decided to lead with, and that was yours to give. It wasn't mine to pull back. He looked at her steadily. That's a generous way to see it. It's an accurate way, she said. Generous would have been not noticing. I noticed everything. I just chose not to make it the main event. What was the main event? You, she said simply. The actual person. Cole turned his coffee cup slowly on the table. Old habit. She'd noticed he did it when he was processing something. Becca, he said. Yeah, I'm not good at the words. The big versions of things, I know that. But I want to say something. Then say it. He looked at her. You're the first person since Marcus died who made me feel like being known was safe, he said. Not just the parts I chose to show, the actual knowing. The whole thing. She held his gaze. That matters to me more than I can probably say correctly, he said. She said it correctly, she said. He nodded once. She reached across the table, not dramatically. Just set her hand over his, the way you reach for something you've decided to hold. His hand turned over. Held hers back. The Christmas lights hummed. The jukebox finished its song and started another. June came by, looked at the table, decided the pie plates could wait, and went to check on the couple by the window instead. Here is what Patty's Diner looked like at 8:15 on a Saturday night in December. 2 people in a corner booth. A man who had spent 20 years learning to be invisible in plain sight, and a woman who had spent 37 years being more visible than she wanted to be. Noticed for all the wrong things, overlooked for all the right ones. He was holding her hand across a table with a coffee ring on it, under lights that had been there longer than either of them had lived in this town. That was the whole picture. Nothing more complicated than that. But underneath that picture, if you knew where to look, was everything it had taken to get there. A Navy SEAL who had built a fortune quietly, and kept it quiet because a dead man had asked him to stay himself. Who had tested every door that opened to him because the alternative, being wanted for the wrong reason, was lonelier than being alone. A nurse who had shown up to her own life every single day, at 2 a.m. and at 7 a.m. and in the parking lot and in the hard rooms and in the mirror before a date she almost didn't go on. Who had learned to read people with the accuracy of someone who could not afford to be wrong. Who had known a good man once and been shaped by the knowing of him. And who had spent 6 years rebuilding herself into someone who could carry that loss and still stay open. 2 people who had, without knowing it, been in the same room 9 years before this. Who had held on to each other, literally, in a medical unit in Virginia, before they had any idea who the other person was. There is a version of this story that's about luck, about coincidence, about the small ridiculous improbability of 2 people finding each other twice. But that's not quite right, because the second time wasn't luck. The second time was Paulette Henderson making a phone call, and Becca saying yes to one date, and Cole not canceling, and a woman noticing a logo shirt, and deciding that what mattered was the person wearing it, not what the logo represented. It was all the small choices made by people who kept showing up even when showing up cost something. That's not luck. Character. Cole paid the check the way he always did, cash. Tip that was more than most people left. They put on their coats, said goodnight to June, who said goodnight, honey, to Becca with the particular warmth of someone who approved of how things had turned out. Outside, the cold hit them cleanly. Their breath in the air. Cole's truck was in the lot. Becca's car was 2 spots down. He walked her to her car. She unlocked it, turned to face him. Cole, yeah, I'm gonna say the thing you're too careful to say first. He looked at her. I love you, she said. Not because of the money, and not in spite of it. Not because you're some kind of hero, and not despite the fact that you're difficult to know. Just you, the actual person who stands up when someone walks in and drives a 12-year-old truck and keeps a promise to a dead man. She paused. That person. I love that person. The parking lot was quiet. The Christmas lights from the diner spilled out onto the pavement, pale gold in the cold air. Cole looked at this woman, who had held his wrist in a room in Virginia 9 years ago and kept him present, who had sat across from him 2 months ago and heard something in him that he'd stopped expecting anyone to hear. I'm not good at the words, he said. I know, she said. He took a slow breath. I love you, he said. I have for a while. I just need to make sure it was the kind that lasts before I said it out loud, is it? Yes, he said. It is, she smiled. The full one. The one that had nothing held back in it. He took her face in his hands, rough hands, careful hands, and he kissed her in the parking lot of Patty's Diner under the Christmas lights. The kind of kiss that wasn't desperate or performed. The kind that felt like finally. When they pulled back, she was still smiling. He almost was. You're going to have to get better at saying it, she said. I know, he said. I'll practice. Good. She got in her car, stood in the cold and watched her pull out of the lot. Then he stood there for a moment by himself. He looked up. Clear night. Cold with stars, he said quietly to no one and to someone. She's good, Marcus. She's the real thing. The night was still and cold and very clear. He got in his truck. He drove home. Some people spend their whole lives showing what they have. Cole Maddox spent his hiding it, and the woman who found him anyway. The one who had known from the first night, who had kept the knowing quiet, who had read him correctly from across a diner table in the September warmth, was the same woman who had held him present 9 years before. In a room where everything was dark and uncertain, she had said, "I'm here. You're going to be okay." She had been right then. She was right now the first time, and this time, and all the times after.
You want to know the thing nobody tells you about getting older? It's not the body. The body you can work around. It's the quiet. You wake up at 50 and the house is still. And you realize, somewhere along the way, without really deciding to, you stop letting people in. Not because you're cold, not because you don't want connection, but because you've been burned enough times that your instincts got rewired. You learn to protect yourself by staying small, by showing people less than the whole picture. I did that for years. I told myself it was practical, smart even. I'd seen what happened when people found out about the money, the way the room changed, the way they changed. And I thought, if I just keep things simple, keep things clean, I won't have to watch that happen again. What I didn't understand, what took me a long time to understand, is that loneliness doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on your door and say, "Here I am." It just slowly becomes the temperature of everything. The background noise you stop noticing because it's always there. I was lonely. I just called it peace. And then I sat across from a woman at a diner on a Tuesday night. A woman the world had been telling her whole life that she wasn't quite enough. Too much of this, not enough of that. She'd heard every version of it, and she'd built something out of that. Not bitterness, not armor, but this extraordinary ability to see people clearly, to cut through the noise and go straight to what was true. She saw me. Not the garage, not the truck, not the flannel shirt or the cash on the table. Me. And here's the thing about being truly seen by another person. It's terrifying, because you can't control it. You can't manage it. You spent years deciding exactly how much to show, and this person just looked past all of it. Like all that careful arrangement you'd done didn't matter. It didn't matter. I want to say something to anyone watching this who has been alone for a long time. Anyone who has decided, quietly, practically without even realizing it, that the closed version of life is safer than the open one. You're not wrong that it's safer. You're wrong that safer is the same as better. There is a kind of love that only comes to people who have already been through something, who have already lost someone or something and had to rebuild. It doesn't feel like the first kind, the young, urgent, desperate kind. It feels different, slower, more deliberate. It feels like choice, not need, not fear, not loneliness dressed up as something else. Just two people who have seen enough of life to know what matters, and choosing each other anyway. Clearly, with full information, with eyes open. That kind of love is not a consolation prize for people who missed the first one. It is its own thing entirely, and it is worth waiting for. I kept a promise to a man who didn't make it home. He asked me not to let money change who I was. I kept that promise. But I think what he really meant, underneath the words, was this: stay open, stay real. Don't let the hard things make you into someone who stops believing good things are still possible. I almost missed it. I almost talked myself out of a Tuesday night at a diner. Don't talk yourself out of yours.